Alright, what's going on everyone? Today we're going to take a look at another World Champion deck in Magic the Gathering's history, and this time it is Dimir Demons, the deck that won the championship in 2024. Standard at the time was very large as we moved to a 3-year rotation for the format, so Standard was composed of the Phyrexian storyline sets, which included Dominaria United, The Brothers War, Phyrexia All Will Be One, March of the Machines. Then there was individual sets like Wilds of Eldraine, Lost Caverns of Ixalan, Outlaws of Thunder Junction, Bloomburrow, and Duskmourn, making this the largest standard environment in the history of the game. The tournament would take place in Las Vegas, Nevada, and it would be won by Javier Dominguez. This would be his second World Championship. His first was in 2018 when he won with Rakdos Aggro. His World Champion card from that win would be a mono red staple for years in Standard. So in 2024, he brought Dimir Demons to the World Championship, which was kind of a rogue deck. It existed, but it wasn't a top tier deck, not super popular, but it's actually pretty cool. It's a Dimir mid-range deck. We'll talk more about these cards later, but what's important to understand is that the main game plan of this deck was to control the board early, lots of removal. However, the main engine of the deck was Unholy Annex and Ritual Chamber. So these room cards are enchantments where they have two halves, but you only need to pay for one when you first play it, and the other half is inactive until you pay its cost. I want to focus on the Unholy Annex first. It's a 3 mana enchantment that says at the beginning of your end step, draw a card. You're going to lose 2, but if you control a demon, instead you gain 2 and the opponent loses 2. So this is very comparable to something like Phyrexian Arena, right? Classic tournament competitive card. It is 3 mana, it draws a card every turn, and you lose 1 life. So if you don't control a demon, the Annex is worse, right? They both cost 3, but the Annex is dealing 2 damage to you instead of 1. However, if you control a demon, it is significantly better. Not only drawing a card, but gaining 2 and dealing 2 is pretty crazy. But you do need to control a demon, and that's where the other half comes into play. That's Ritual Chamber, which makes a 6/6 demon with flying for 5 mana. Now a 5 mana 6/6 flyer by itself wouldn't be that exceptional, but the fact that you get this on top of an amazing card draw engine, and it helps ensure that you have a demon in play, is very good, right? You're basically playing a Phyrexian Arena, and if you want to at any point, you could say, okay, just 5 mana, make a 6/6 flyer. And another demon that the deck played for Unholy Annex is Archfiend of the Dross. It's 4 mana for a 6/6 flyer, which is huge. However, it enters with 4 oil counters. You have to remove 1 every turn, and if it runs out of oil, it kills you. You lose the game. So it's sketchy, similar to the Unholy Annex, which can also cause you to lose the game, but typically this kills the opponent long before it runs out of oil counters, especially since it makes the opponent lose 2 when they block, or when any creature dies for that matter. So you have a 6/6 flyer, you have an Unholy Annex that is going to drain 2 every turn, and your Archfiend is going to make them lose another 2 whenever you play a creature removal spell, right? And because the Unholy Annex is drawing extra cards, you just draw more removal. And speaking of card draw, that's pretty important for this deck. It has Caustic Bronco and Fairy Mastermind. The Bronco is a 2 mana 2/2 that when it attacks will reveal the top card of your library, put it into your hand, and then you lose life equal to its mana value if it isn't saddled. If it is saddled, the opponent loses that life instead. So very similar to Annex, it's card draw that can punish your opponent in the right circumstance. Then there's Fairy Mastermind, which will draw a card whenever the opponent draws their second card each turn. And it has flash, so you can flash it in response to a draw trigger to draw a card yourself. It can also be a surprise blocker, working as a pseudo removal spell against a small aggressive creature, and this makes it really difficult for your opponent to win the card advantage game. If every single time they try to draw extra cards, you get one as well, that means this deck is going to usually have way more gas. This, by the way, is also a World Championship card from Yuta Takahashi. Pretty cool. So the deck also has a combo built into it that can win the game instantly, or almost instantly. That is, it has Doomsday Excruciator, and Jace the Perfected Mind. So the Excruciator is a huge demon, another demon for the Annex. You really need to have a plan to win the game when you cast this, because when it enters, it exiles both players' libraries down to the final 6 cards. Doesn't matter how many cards you have, it exiles your entire library except the bottom 6. This means that both players are going to mill out in 6 turns. However, you draw an extra card each turn, so your clock is actually down to 3. However, Jace has a -X ability where you pay X and the opponent mills 3 times X cards. So if you have just 2 loyalty, you can make the opponent mill 6, which makes this a 2-card combo that can, like I said, not instantly win technically, but win on the following turn. You can mill your opponent out with these 2 cards. Jace can enter, by the way, with 5 loyalty, and his +1 gives a creature -3 power. So this, combined with how controlling the deck can be and how well it could draw cards, means you could very potentially just already have a Jace in play when you play the Excruciator and just instantly mill the opponent out. The rest of the deck was all about control. It played 4 Duress and 2 Spell Stutter. The first is a discard spell that can hit non-creatures and non-lands, and this was particularly relevant in this metagame as even the aggro decks were typically filled with spells. There were lots of spell-based prowess decks, so lots of targets for duress even against aggro decks. Spell Stutter is just a counter spell that gets harder to pay for if you have fairies, and the deck did have Fairy Mastermind. For removal, it had 1 Cut Down and 3 Anoint with Affliction. Both of these are for small creatures and aggro decks. The first can remove anything with total power and toughness 5 or less, and Anoint with Affliction exiles anything with mana value 3 or less. The corrupted text is irrelevant here, but exiling was important as there were lots of red creatures that had death triggers, and exiling helped you avoid those. For bigger creatures, the deck had Go for the Throat and Shoot the Sheriff. Both of these are 2 mana instant speed removal spells with some restrictions. The first can't hit artifact creatures, and the second can't hit outlaws, but these are going to get the job done in most situations. In the mana base, the deck had Fountain Port, Restless Reef, and Undercity Sewers for utility lands. The port can do tons of things. It can sacrifice tokens to draw cards, it can make 1/1 fish, and it can ramp by making treasures. Remember that both the treasures and the fish tokens can be sacrificed to the first ability to draw. So you could make a fish token, the following turn you could block with the fish token, then sacrifice it to draw, right? So very mid-rangey, lots of card advantage stuff here. The Reef animates into a 4/4 shark with Death Touch that can mill 4 cards when it attacks. So this can be used defensively, right? With the Death Touch, it's a sort of removal spell for big creatures, or it can be a win condition, hitting for 4 damage per turn. Not to mention, if you play the Excruciator, then start milling 4 per turn, opponent's gonna die in a turn or 2. The Sewers are just a surveil land. Enters tap, surveil 1, just a little bit of filtering. Other dual lands the deck had access to include Dark Slick Shores, Underground River, and Gloom Lake Verge. The shores enter untapped in the early game. The river will deal 1 damage to you if you tap it for colored, but you can always try to use it for colorless in most situations. And the Verge is a blue land first, but can tap for black if you control an island or a swamp, of which there are 8 basic swamps, and notably 0 basic islands. Remember that the deck had to cast Doomsday Excruciator. Fountain Port is already problematic. If you draw a Fountain Port, that makes the Excruciator even harder to play. However, it does make treasures, so it kind of makes up for it. It can make a treasure to add an extra black mana, but you definitely didn't want to be drawing basic islands with this deck. And a quick look at the sideboard. As always, we don't go too in depth here, but it had Cut Down, Anoint with Affliction, and Withering Torment as extra spot removal spells. It had Dreams of Steel and Oil, Deadly Cover-Up, and Negate for more control. The first is a Hand Disruption spell that can exile a card from a graveyard. There were some Reanimator decks. The second is a Board Wipe that can exile a card from the graveyard and then get all the extra copies out of the library, so you can shut down decks that need a specific card to win. And Negate, of course, classic sideboard counterspell. It had some extra planeswalkers in the form of Liliana of the Veil, and an extra copy of Jace the Perfected Mind. Liliana, classic mid-range planeswalker, great at reducing resources, especially when your deck is so good at drawing extra cards, and Jace gave you an extra chance to mill people out in long, grindy control matchups. It also had some spiciness with Ghost Vacuum and Outrageous Robbery. The first is a graveyard hate card, letting you remove cards one at a time. Again, there were some reanimator decks, but it can be then sacrificed to make 1/1 copies of all the creatures it exiled, so that's kind of fun. Outrageous Robbery exiles X cards from the top of the opponent's library, and then you can cast them as long as they're exiled. Not only is this a huge momentum swing in terms of card advantage, but it could also be a huge mill card if you're playing a bunch of Jaces and stuff in again, like a control matchup that's going super long. And yeah, that's the deck. While it was technically a Dimir Demons deck, it was really a Dimir control deck first that was really good at just outdrawing the opponent, and it used some powerful demons and demon synergies and a demon-based combo to win the game in the late game. And that's the deck that won the World Championship in 2024. So if you like this video and want to see more like it, be sure to check out the description, as I have a link to a playlist full of the entire history of World Champion decks. Some of those are pretty old at this point. I almost feel like I could remake this entire series. But regardless, in the meantime, thanks for watching everyone, and I will see you in the next one.